In DAF Zayin, we are in the middle of the machloikis between Papa and Afuna Bereder Rabbi Yeshua when it comes to parutz ka'oimed. So the Mishnah DAF Vavam base taught us that if you have oimed meruba ala parutz, that's a good wall. If it's parutz meruba ala oimed, it's mevatel the toid of the mechitzes. What happens if they are exactly equal? Rav Papa is matir, muter, and Afuna Bereder Rabbi Yeshua aser. It goes without saying that it's easy to see some inner meaning in this machloikis. You know, the whole concept of a rasha, of a tzaddik, and the beinani. So it's not more bad than good. It's not more good than bad. It's 50-50. Now, Papa is saying that it is still considered a valid wall. That's gavaldik. Meruba mida toiva. We're going to have in the Gemara a lengthy Tosefta Abraisa that's going to speak about 3 categories of partitions and 3 rules regarding partitions. And ultimately, we're going to come to the halacha that we will paskin like Rav Papa. God willing, on Daf Tezayim and Beis, we're going to learn the new Mishnah that's going to speak more about what we call mechitzois ru'u'ois, inferior, substandard mechitzas that are made out of ropes. That means you have either vertical beams that are narrow, but they're placed one within 3 tvachim of the other. You're losing lavut to come to a solid wall. Or if you have the same horizontal, yes, it's a valid wall because of lavut, but we'll see restrictions to it. We're going to have a shita of Rabbi Yehuda that's going to be further clarified in the Gemara, that we only are allowed to rely on mechitzas ru'uos if there is a need for a shayara, for a caravan, meaning for a group of 3 people or more, but not for 2 people, not for 1 person. We're going to have a gavaldic question regarding the following. We say that if you have a breach in the wall or an opening in the wall, if it's not wider than 10 amos, it's not called a breach, it's called a pesach. Do we apply the same thing if the gaps in the wall are not vertical, but they are horizontal? Because we're making this type of rope wall by leaving less than 3 tvachim, putting a rope, less than 3 tvachim, putting a rope or a string. If a wall is built out of such a horizontal contraption, and we'll figure out that there'll be a scenario in which there is also a gap, which will be a horizontal gap, do we also say that if it's not wider than 10 amas, it's called a pesach? Is it a pesach? Can we view it as a pesach? And as we'll explain, that's a boy of Rav Hamnuna with various nafkaminas and a lot more. Let us start on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. We left off 5 lines from the top of the Amud in the beginning of the line, Tashema, Nachamo. We are discussing the machloikis by parutz ke'oimed. We want to see whether we can prove either way, either like Rav Papa's leniency or like Rav Huna, Bereder Rabbi Yeshua's stringency, and Tashema coming here. And again, we're going to be starting Tosefta. Generally, we call all of these works of the Tanoim that are not in the Mishnah a Braisa, so we're going to be learning a Braisa that, like we mentioned, is first going to lay forth 3 categories of mechitzas and then 3 laws regarding all mechitzas. Okay, Toshima says the Tosefta, and say so after Oimer. It comes out that shalosh midos b'mechitzois, that we have 3 categories of mechitzos, of partitions. This is so gavaldik. Category number 1, we're going from the physical smallest segments of walls to the largest. That if kol shehu pachus mishloisha, if you have a wall, it's not one solid mechitza. The pieces of solid, the pieces of oimid, if they are less than 3 tvachim, and you have one near the other, so as we have been learning, tzarech shelo yehei bein zeh lezeh shloisha, you may not have a gap of 3. Once you hit 3, then we can't say lavud. It has to be gaps of less than 3. And here we are giving an insight as to why is there such a din of lavud. I know it's a halacha l'moshe misinai, but that's now a milsa b'taima kidei shelo yizdaker hagidi bebas rosh. In order for a gedi, for a small goat, not to be able to leap headlong through the openings. Yeah, it can squeeze even if it's less than 3, but it hinders it, which is why we are allowed to consider, being that the gaps are less than 3 into one solid wall. Now the chiddush over here will be is that even though the gaps are wider than the solids, let's say the solid is a half a tefach, and every gap can be 2.5 tefach. And we have been learning the rule in the Mishnah that if you have parutz meruba lo oimid is not good. Here we do allow this. This is the first gewaldige rule of the Braisa. Why are we allowing the gaps to be wider than the solids? Because of lavud. Because the din of lavud is that as long as one solid is within the other solid, there isn't 3 tvachim. There's only less than 3 tvachim. We view this as one solid wall. Remember this one. Now we appreciate lavud. So there's a gewaldige leniency over here, based on the rule of lavud. That's category number 1. Category number 2 says the Tosefta, umigimol adalid, if the solid pieces of wall are themselves 3 tvachim, or up until 4, not 4, up until 4, then now that we can't apply the law of lavud, now yes, we have to go into the law of the Mishnah, that you can't have parutz meruba al ha'omed. But listen, be medayik in the words of the Braisa, that in other words, we don't allow that between one section and the other, there is a gap as big as the solid. Wow. We don't allow parutz kimeloyoy, parutz ke'oimed. Just from this, it comes out not like Rav Papa. If the Tosefta would end there, that would, the Gemara always brings the rest of it, but then we would see clearly how this will be a kasha Rav Papa. Thing is that in the next liner of the Tosefta, the Braisa itself seems to imply the opposite, which really means there is either a stira in the Braisa, or we're going to have to learn into the Braisa, and that will be the opening of the solution. But okay, so remember this line. You can't have a gap as wide. The gaps have to be lesser than the solids. Clearly. Now here's the challenge. Here's the inherent contradiction. Now, first of all, you don't have a mechitza. And now in this second category, the Braisa is going to add the following halacha, but quickly reviewing. The context of this Tosefta it's written in Kalayim. And as we quoted already a few times the halacha, that when it comes to planting greens or grains, not only may we not plant them together, greens or legumes cannot be planted in a vineyard. They may not even be planted adjacent. Greens and grains cannot be planted in a vineyard. They cannot be planted adjacent to the vineyard. How much do you have to separate one from the other? So as we learned, there is a certain maras ayin aspect involved on a biblical level. If you have a proper kedem for amas. If it's not a proper halachic kedem, then at least 6 tvachim. But if there is a physical wall or a halachic wall, then you are allowed to plant the vines up until one side, all the way up until the wall. And yes, you can plant the greens and the grains all the way up to the other side of the wall. And as we already learned above, that, for example, when you have a Tzuras HaPesach, even though physically there is no wall coming all the way down to the ground, we could plant the kedem on one side and mamish the greens and grains on the other side. So now we're learning about such walls. So now, if you have parutz meruba al ha'omed, af keneged ha'omed, not only can't we plant the greens and the grains on the entirety of the length of the halachic mechitza? No, there is no mechitza. And even opposite the solid, you can argue maybe by the solid little piece of wall, at least on one side a kedem, on the other side a grain. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. In other words, In other words, a solid that's not at least 4 tfachim is not significant. Now, if that solid would have been added to, would have been part of and made a mechitza, then you have yourself a whole mechitza. But since a mechitza you don't have, but here again, here you have this apparent stira, either because it is parutz ke'oimed, or because it's parutz meruba ala oimed, so therefore you can't even plan yichap af keneged oimed os. That's the second category. And now the third category, kol shuhu dalid. Dalid is arba'ah. 4 means with a hey, with 4 tfachim. Means if the solid is 4 tfachim up until tel amis, so then tzadek shaloi yehei bein zelozakim kimiloi. Again, this is the same as the second segment. If you're going to have gaps in between, the gaps cannot be like the solids. Again, this implies not like Rav Papa. If they are equal, it's not good. And again, clear. And here again, the same inherent stira. But here it's not the same stira. Here now the Brisa says, and that's again a problem if parutz is ka'oimed, even though you don't have a halachic partition. But since every solid is at least 4 tfachim wide, at least keneged ha'oimed muter. Elama keneged ha'parutz is also, because it's parutz ke'oimed and it's mavatal the mechitz. At kan, my friends, the 3 categories. Each category had a unique chiddush, right? First chiddush on the first category was you can have parutz meruba al ha'oimed. Parutz meruba. Why? Because since you have lavud means that it's mamish closed off. It's all amud. Second category, again, here's the inherent stira, is either telling us that parutz ke'oimed is not good, or it's telling you that parutz meruba al ha'oimed is not good. But the chiddush of the second category is that once the mechitza is batul, you can't even plant opposite these little solids, kerem, and grains because they're not 4 tfachim wide. Once it's 4 tfachim wide, even when you don't have a halachic mechitza, at least you can connect ha'omed, you can plant kerem here and grains over there. These are the 3 categories, and now we're going to go into 3 halachas. Now these 3 halachas is for all types of mechitzas. Rule number 1, the im hoya oimen merubal parutz, af keneged parutz mutar, which is gavaldik. Even though bigashmius, it's breached, it's open. You see the kedem here, and you see up until it, greens, grains, doesn't matter. There is a halachic wall. Rule number 2, b'chlal for mechitzas, that if nitrat sabi yosemi eser, even if it is in the sum total, oimid merubal parutz. Doesn't matter. If there is a breach that's wider than 10 amas, the halal is wider than 10 amas, then also that entire partition is disqualified. And rule number 3, if you have poles that you embedded in the ground, very skinny poles, very skinny, and one is far from the other, wider than 10. However, but we're going to do what we call a tzuras HaPesach. They didn't have the types of strings we had today. They would use vines, but vines are flimsy, so they would plait vines together. They would wind vines together, and they would place it on top of the poles. Indeed, as we learned on Daf Yud Aleph, afilu b'yosim ma'aser, even if one pole is distant from the other, allowing for there to be a halal more than 10. Nevertheless, mutter, you are allowed to plant vines in one side and to plant greens or grains on the other side, all the way up until the imaginary, not the halachic wall, because that is the din of a tzuras HaPesach, which no one debates. By the way, the whole machloikas we had on Daf Yud Aleph, whether this works, machloikas Tanoim, like they had in the Mishnah, is only for Shabbos. But for Kalayim, indeed, Kol Alma Moida, that Tzuras HaPesach works. Okay, end of Raisa. And now, again, it's clear, we already got the whole conversation. It says the Gemara Ketani Miyas, in the first category of the 3 categories, which is when you're using the solids, right, are less than 3 tfachim. Megimel, in the second category, when the solids are 3 tfachim, up until less than 4. That was the cutoff line to 4. Megimel ma'adalit. In other words, if the space if the open will be like the solid, it's not good. Mamish, it's a yufta de Rav Papa. Says, and we already know that the Braisa itself contradicts itself, but this will answer everything. So Amalach Rav Papa, mamish, like we had at the end of yesterday's share, that my meloyoi, we keep on teaching that the space, the open, should be like the solid. No, kimeloya means nichnas v'yotze. Nichnas v'yotze means you have to make sure that you should be able to easily fill in the open. Now, when you have a solid and a solid, if the space in between them is exactly as wide as the solid, then you can't go in and out. You can't put a new beam in and out easily. In order for you to be yoitze v'nichnas with ease, it means that the gap in between is a little bit bigger than the size of the solid. Adarabba, now everything else fits. The problem is only when the parutz is more than the oimet. In order to have, that's when the problem is. And when would you have more breach than oimet? When you can easily be yoitze v'nichnas. And hachinam mistabra, as we just pointed out, because it says right afterwards, im hayaparutz meruba in the second category. When Oimet then said that was the whole chiddush of the second category, that since no solid is 4 tefachim wide, it's all less than 4 tefachim, then af keneged Oimet aser, that mechitza itself is insignificant. But hold on, you're saying parutz meruba al Oimet. Is the charaya that if it's parutz ke Oimet, then muter. It's a stira. No, the meaning of the words kimeloyoi, it means yoitze v'nichnas shmamina. Now the Gemara goes in the opposite direction. That says that even if it is equal, it's already asur. The end of the second category writes that if it's parutz meruba al ha'omed, that's a problem. That implies that if it's equal, it's good. So Amallah, so responds to the Yeshua, look at the Sefer, meaning the Braisa has, the Tosefta has the 3 categories of walls and then the 3 rules. Look at the part of the Braisa that speaks about the rules. What does the Braisa say? Im hoya oimen meruba ala paretz, then af keneged paretz muter. We're speaking about, because meruba oimen, it's halachically a wall. L'chayra haki paretz aser. So indeed, so kumtachai seifa kasha l'Rav Papa, reisha kasha l'Rav Rabbi Yeshua. So answers the Gemara. Seifa l'Rav Papa loy kasha. Either the tani reisha parutz meruba al ha'omed, for the sake of symmetry, of uniformity. Tana seifa. This is a classical answer that we find many times. Tana seifa oimed meruba al parutz. But especially again, Tradish Shabbat was learned by heart, that helps you memorize. He goes the opposite direction. The Meduik is the Sefer. Either the Bailam is the Sefer Oimed Meruba ala Paretz. So therefore, and only then it's good when Oimed is Meruba ala Paretz. So Tani Reisha Paretz Meruba ala Oimed. So therefore, this Braisa cannot be refuted, cannot be used neither to refute one nor the other. And now, let's go back and analyze the Braisa itself. Bottom line is that according to Rav Papa, when it's parutz ke'oimed, it's muter. So now the Gemara asks the following question: Rav Papa, the reason why the Braisa, the Tosefta divided category number 1 from category number 2, together, both the case when you had solids that are less than 3, and the case where solids began with the size of 3, right? Because they don't share the same halacha. Why don't they share the same halacha? Because when the wall is 3, when the solid is 3, and the gap is 3, according to Rav Papa, it's good. The gap is 3, it's good. In the case where the solids are less than 3, if the gap would be 3, solid less than 3, gap 3, it would not be good. Why would it not be good? Because then it would be parutz meruba al ha'omed. So it's a different category. The moment the solid itself is 3, then you can have a gap that's 3. Parutz ha'omed is muter. But according to Rabbi Yeshua, He should have set the first and the second category together, which would be that that if the solids themselves are less than 3, the moment the gaps are 3, it's not going to be good. You can't have 3, because according to Rabbi Yeshua, when the solids are less than 3 and the gap is 3, it's not good because it's parutz meruba lo oimed. The same psul will be, right, if it's 3 of solid and 3 of gap. It's also possible because according to Rabbi Yeshua, parutz ka'oimed is also possible. Why did we separate them? Answers the Gemara, even though taka, they're both puzzle, but they're puzzle for different reasons. And whenever the psul is coming from a different reason, they belong in a second category. When you have, the first case was that you need lavut. The reason why we don't allow for there to be a gap of 3 or more has nothing to do because we want for there to be, according to Rabbi Yeshua, more oimed than parutz. No. The first category wanted to introduce the din of lavut, that as long as the gap is less than 3, then one solid combines to the other solid midin lavut. And if you don't have 3, if you have an opening of 3, you have a gap of 3, that means you can't use lavut. That's why it's possible, because you don't have lavut. As we gave the reason for lavut, that the reason why the Eibusher told Moshe Rabbeinu that if you have a gap less than 3, we combine one solid with the other because the gedi cannot easily intrude in between the gaps. The psul of the seifa, according to Rafunam, if the solid is 3 and the gap is 3, it's not a puzzle because parutz ka'oimed is puzzle, shalei parutz ka'oimed. But that's another reason. So even though taka, they will both be puzzle, but since it's from different reasons, we put it into 2 different categories. Okay. And now that we brought out the Braisa, the final ha'ara on the Braisa. We learned already a few times that really what the shiur of lavut is a machlokes between the Chachamim and the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. And indeed, when the Braisa in the first category that's teaching you the din of lavut emphasizes that for you to apply lavut, the gap has to be pachus mishloisha, not pachus marba, l'chura, that's mani rabbanim. That's the sheet of rabbanim that lavut is less than 3 tvachim. The amri pachus mishloisha in lavut. If it's already 3, you don't say lavut. Well, hold on. Ema seifa. My friends, the second seifa is the second category. That what? Kol shu shloisha. Right? If the wall itself is 3 up until less than 4, remember that whole din? There, the Braisa says that if it's parutz ka'oimed, according to Rav Huna, if it's parutz meruba al ha'oimed, the chiddush there is that since you don't have a wall, not only don't you have a wall, but the solid is so insignificant that you can't even plant on opposite sides just of the solid vines and greens or grains to design on the base. But who gave you the shiur of 4? Who told you that there's a magical shiur that if the solid is 4 tfachim, it's chashuv? Where did that come from? L'cha'ura, this is coming from the din of lavut. L'cha'ura. No, it's just like Rashbag says that there is a difference between less than 4 and 4. He's machshiv, the 4 tefach marker does something. L'cha'ura, it's linked to this din. That is only a song of Sheming Gamliel that holds pachos ma'arabah lavut. Because if we're going to follow lavut of the Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, we don't find any significant halachic change by the measurement of 3 tvachim to 4 tvachim. Mishloisha v'ad arba should be the same. Shouldn't make a difference. Shloisha v'arba chadu. And just like we have in the third category, that if the solid is 4 tvachim or more, even if the mechitza is batal because it's parutz ka'oimed or parutz meruba lo oimed, nevertheless you could plant on this side and on that side because that piece at least is valid for a partition for itself. According to the Rabbanan, the same would be true even if the mechitza is only 3 tvachim wide. So Reisha Rabbanan, the Sefer Rashbag. So Amar Abaye, first of all, me the Reisha Rabbanan, because when we speak about lavut, we use the shiur of less than 3 to 3. It must be Sefer Amar Rabbanan, and you don't connect that point of the second category. That once you don't have a din mechitza, you can't even use the little standing part to plant on one side and the opposite side. It has nothing to do with lavut. If you want to use a little piece of standing physical partition as, there's a partition, there's no marasayan, I can plant here and there. There's a takadin, not connected to lavud. It has to have the width of 4 tvachim. And if it doesn't even have that, if it becomes part of a larger mechitza, gavaldik. But if you don't have that, then that in itself is not chash. Rabbi says, I'm going in the opposite direction. That means the Sefer Rav Shlomo Gamliel, Reish Rav Shlomo Gamliel. Yes, lavud is the cutoff point is 4 tvachim. However, we had this already a few times. This is good. That the Chi, Amar, Rabban, Shimon ben Gamliel, that Amrin and lavud, that we say lavud even though it's 3 tvachim, even though it's 3 tvachim plus, as long as it's less than 4 tvachim. When do we have that mark of point? Hanemila lamaylam. However, Abel, the first wide line, the moment there is a gap near the ground, my gedoyim boykim boy, since even the Rashbag is moida that we can't apply lavud unless it's less than 3, because bigashmi is, however you measure this, a gedi will only be hindered in going through that area if the space, the opening is less than 3. Very good. Bottom line is, beautiful Tosefta. We didn't prove or refute any of these 2 opinions, so we're back to the machlokes. As we said in the intro, we're really learning about Tzadik, Rosh, and Beinani. Understand, there's majority good is good, the majority bad is bad. What happens if it's equal? Parutz ke'oimet. Papa muter. Rabuna b'rei Yeshua aser. No, so what's the halacha? Tashemam. Second white line in the Amid. It says in a brayso, the Fonos halolu. This brayso is speaking about Shabbos, not Kalayim. That when you have these walls, guys, we learned about this and we had a picture a few daf ago. Daf Yud Dalit. If sheruban pesachim v'chalonis, if this mechitza is comprised of the majority, that can be, but we're going to correct it in a moment. Doors and windows. Doors means an opening. And a window also doesn't mean the way you think a window with a window frame and a glass. No, that's closed. Windows means it's a hole in the wall. The old style, the original style doors and windows. And also, as we mentioned, that the lowest part of the window is within 10 tefachim off the ground. Because if you have a wall and the window holes only begin above 10 tefachim, I don't care. I don't care because of that rule of good salik. But here, if the psachim and the chalonis all are, the gap is all within 10 tefachim, nevertheless, as the Braisa muter, it's still considered a valid partition, which will allow you to carry inside the partitions. End of quote. Now, first of all, the Gemara says, come on, if these walls have roiv, psachim, and chalonos, then it's not meruba amad ala paretz. So you have to amend the opening line of the Braisa. Even if there's many of them, it's mutter as long as meruba ala paretz. So again, what does that infer? Kiparetz aser, and that will be up to you to the Rav Papa. So the Gemara says, you know what? From this Braisa, you're right, Tiyufta. Nevertheless, we just had this expression. We just had this expression a few daf ago, which is really unusual. The klal is, whenever the Gemara says the word kasha, so says the Rashbam and many other Rishonim, not refuted. Whenever, even though the Gemara doesn't give an answer, but the Gemara expects of us to see that it's not a checkmate. Tiyufta means checkmate. And the rule is that when the Gemara concludes with Tiyufta, after us, Chachma Yisrael, La'achar Chasimas HaTalmud will never paskin against the Tiyufta as long as the Gemara itself doesn't do it. But you have some times where the Gemara says Tiyufta, and the Gemara says, nevertheless, we'll paskin like that Shita. You refuted it. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta v'hilchasa v'rapasa. Frankly, Gemara, Tiyufta v'hilchasa? Yes. You know why? Because the same diuk you're making from this Braisa, and you're right, it's Tiyufta ing Rav Papa. The first diuk the Gemara made on Daf Tez Vav Amid Beis, after quoting the Machlokes Rav Papa and Afuna B'Reid Rabbi Yeshua, we made the same inference in the reverse direction from our Mishnah. So if you have to learn paskin like an inference of a Mishnah versus an opposite inference of a Braisa, that's the klal. We paskin like the Mishnah. Mishum the daika masnis on our Mishnah infers mamish like Rav Papa. It says in our Mishnah, I I know that the Gemara on Daf Tezvav Amud Beis says it's not a conclusive proof. That was those Amiroim. Here, Ravina Navashi saying no. Ha Kebinyan is mutter, and Taketz Machloikas Tanoim, according to this, Machloikas Rav Papa Rafuna, Machloikas Mishnah and Braisa, and we will pass like the Mishnah. All right. Then we're moving on. Mishnah Daf Tezayin Amud Beis. Now, we mentioned this already yesterday. The words are mechitzois reuois, substandard partitions or inferior partitions. Even though we're learning lavud, and we just had this tosefta that says that mamish lavud means it's solid, right? By lavud, you can have physically parutz merub ala oimed, right? Many people, when they build a sukkah, that's exactly what they do. If they don't rely on the walls because it blows too much in the wind, talking about the plastic tarps. So, the Fruma people, they put up these ropes, right, the straps. So what do? You from the ground, you go up less than 3 tvachim. Then you put a rope. Then from the rope, you go up less than 3 tvachim. You put a rope. Then you go up less than 3 tvachim. If the sum total width of the rope will add up to a tefach plus, right, because we need to have 10 tvachim height, and you have 3 gaps, each gap is less than 3 tvachim. So you have less than 9 tvachim. If the sum total of the rope makes up that difference, tefach plus, that means that from the ground until the top string, you have 10 tvachim, you got yourself a wall. And the guy, that's the whole beauty. Now, 1 second, it's parutz, merub ala oimed. Yes, begashmi is yes. Once you use lavud closes it off. It's considered closed. You should know that's called the mechitza re'ua. Why is it called the mechitza re'ua? Because the solids are only going in one direction. Like we spoke out yesterday, like we're speaking again. So this is emes sai both if you have the ropes going on a horizontal line. Same thing will be if you have ropes skinny, that are vertically. And again, you have less than 3 tvachim in between one vertical and the other vertical. I don't care anymore about parutz merub ala oimed because of lavud. It's a mechitza. It's called a mechitza re'ua. Says the Holy Mishnah. Makifin shloisha chavalim zelam aylam izem. You can make a mechitza by making horizontal ropes, like we just explained in the first example, putting one above the other. The first one is not on the ground. You're using lavud. You're giving a gap of less than 3 tvachim, rope number 1. A gap less than 3 tvachim, rope number 2. A gap less than 3 tvachim, rope number 3. In this case, we are only using 3 ropes. Don't forget, we have to hit the height of 10 tvachim. How much gaps do you have? Less than 9. Less because it's 3 minus a bit, 3 minus a bit, 3 minus a bit. In order for the top of the top rope to be 10 tvachim off the ground, then the sum total width of all 3 together has to be a tefach and a little bit. Number 1, you have to have lavud. Number 2, the shiur chavolim. Now many are take out the vav. It's not ve'oivion. The shiur chavolim oivion. The sum total of the width of the ropes together has to complement enough for you to hit the 10 tvachim off the ground. It has to be yosed al tefach. Kedei sheyeh chevel shkei she'akoil asar tvachim. Says the Mishnah, you can use it. Be medayik, my friends. The Mishnah says makifin, right? I'm sorry. Very good. Makifin. Next says the Mishnah the same heter of using lavud, even if all of the solid is mamash a rope, is sai if the ropes are placed horizontally, and the same makifin bakonim. Konim means reeds. Reeds means it's standing vertically. You're going to have physically parutz merub ala oimed. I don't care. Lavud. Makifin bakonim ubavat shalei ben konim lakana lachavei shloisha tvachim. End of Tanach. Now here's the word. Bashayara dibru divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, this heter of relying on koisel ru'ua, because the ropes are only going in one direction, is only a hemshech to the previous Mishnah. Shayara shechansna. Shayara means a caravan. A caravan halachically means there's a group of 3 people or more. If you only have 2 people going to Catalina Island and camping out there for Shabbos, Atzuras HaPesach is great. We're not talking about Atzuras HaPesach. We're talking about this type of mechitza re'ua. They can't rely on it. That's what it sounds like. Rabbi Yehuda is saying the Gemara is going to amend this. The Gemara is going to qualify this. However, The Chachamim oimrim, no. Like Dibru b'shayara. The reason why this Mishnah is a hemshich to Tezvav Amid Beis. Tezvav Amid Beis begins shayara. They mentioned shayara ela b'hoiva. You know, the common case. Why would people have to build before Shabbat Sa'edov out there in the open? Because they're traveling in the caravan. But the same halacha will be if you're going by yourself. Even though, yeah, you're using lavud, nevertheless, it's a bona fide, perfect halachically kosher mechitza. Now, says the Mishnah, very similar. Kol mechitza she'ena, both shall see vertical and edav and horizontal. In other words, what differentiates a good mechitza from a mechitza re'uah is not mamish solid. We mentioned all this yesterday. Today in LA, it's very common. You get these pieces of wood. I forgot what they're called. They're like it's called a trellis, maybe. That they go in both directions. The moment,
Lattice.
Lattice. Thank you. A lattice is not a mechitza re'uah. That's what the Mishnah is saying. The moment it's going both shasi and edav, if a mechitza is not lattice, then eina mechitza. These are the words of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. It sounds like there's Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda are saying the same thing, but they're not, because Rabbi Yehuda allows you to use the ropes if it's for a shayara. Sounds like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is even more machmer. He b'chlal disagrees with everything. You may never use it. No. It sounds like the Chachamim are the same of the ratio, but the Gemara is going to clarify the difference between them. Chachamim no. Echad mishnei devarim. I don't need it to be both shasi and edav. I don't need it to be both vertical and horizontal, like we learned in the ratio. It can be either vertical or horizontal. Okay. Now let's start with the Gemara. Omar Rav Hamnuna, Omar Rav. Harei sha'amru. Harei amru. That which we learned. That oimid meruba ala parutz b'shasi haba oimid. What is he talking about? Not lavud. So Rashi says he's going back to the Mishnah we had on last DAF. The Mishnah said, not in the case of the ropes. The Mishnah said in DAF go DAF tezvav amebeis shayara shechansa bebika v'hikifur klei behema. What was the example that happened? They had saddles, so they made piles of their saddles. Now the width of these walls are the width is not a rope. The width is not and the space in between was not the lavud. But nevertheless, we consider them vertical walls because you make, how wide is a saddle? You pile it up 10 tefachim. So really, you do have a shtickle vertical wall, another pile of saddles. The Mishnah said a daf ago that as long as the sum total of oimid is more, l'kula alma, more than the sum total of the paruts, you got yourself a proper wall. Either's openings, and it's not a wall that has a lintel on the top. No, it's just piles, it's just kanim. Okay, so the din is we say the opening is called a Pesach. And it makes sense because when you make a door, think about you. I know that our doors have the other advantage that it's also a tzuras HaPesach because there's a lintel. But not all doors. You have a door in the gate in my yard. It's just a gate. The vart of a door is that people, when they make a door, the door is also vertical. So Rav Hamnuna says we know that when you have only a vertical strips of wall, as long as it is oimim ro'al aparutz, bishasi means vertical, we're good. Right now, if the gap is more than 10 ames, that's a pirza. But if not, it's a door. What happens if you have a wall that the gaps are not vertical? It's not that the wall is vertical and the gaps are vertical, which is the normal image you have of a Pesach opening. What happens if the whole world is horizontal? And then you have a gap that's also horizontal. Do we say that as long as it's oimin normal aparutz, as long as the gap is not more than 10 ames, you're good, because then the gap is a Pesach. It's not exactly a Pesach. Is that a normal Pesach? I know sometimes you have gates, and you have to get to the other side, so you bend down and you go through an opening in a gate. I know that, but that's already not a normal Pesach. That's his boya. Be'edav mai. Now we're going to say it's not so simple. We're going to have to further define the case of the boya as we'll see. So Amar Abaya, what kind of question is that? Look at our Mishnah. The Mishnah says shiur chavalim v'oivyon, as long as the sum total, again, take out the vav, of the ropes is more than a tefach. Because like this, shiur hakoy lasar tvachim, Now, our Mishnah is using here lavud because the space in between each rope is less than 3 tvachim. Now, the Isa, if we allow to have a gap also horizontally, as long as you're going to have oimid merubah ala paretz chevra halkah, it's still going to be a valid wall. Lama li yaser al tefach. Why do we need to have the width of the sum total of the 3 strings to add up to a tefach plus? We don't need that. Guys, halkah, this is brilliant. Li'avid pachus mishloisha. Let's go from the ground. Go from the ground and have a opening of less than 3. And then put a chevel that is mamish skinny. You can have 10 of these chavel and you're not going to hit a tefach, which is, by the way, what many people do today. Today that we have good ropes, skinny ropes. And then pachus mishloisha and also only a chevel mashu. Now, guys, where are we up to right now? By the way, we have lavut. So if you have a drop less than 3, with the rope, you have 3 tefachim. A drop less than 3, with the rope, you have another 3 tefachim. How many tefachim do you have so far? 6 tefachim. Because of lavud, we consider this oimid, solid. Now, what's the minimum height of a wall? 10 tefachim. The other 4 tefachim, even if they are empty, even if they are taka empty, you don't have lavud. So what? It's oimid meruba al haparutz. If we're going to use the final 4 as a Pesach, then that's good enough. And then pachus ma'arba the chevel mashu, and that will be enough. Even though, in other words, why do the Mishnah, which is giving a case of 3 strings, needs to give us strings themselves that amount to together the tefach plus? You don't need that. Here you have a case where you only need to use lavud for the first 6. Once you have 6, it's most. From 10, 6 is the roiv. The other 4 can be opened. And all the way on the top, you have the string again. And then you're going to say, it's a Pesach. The fact that the Mishnah does not allow that is a raya that we don't allow for this concept of a Pesach if it's horizontal. Says the Gemara, no, to Abai V'tizbere, is this a logic? No. What you said doesn't work. Where exactly would you put this gap of 4 or a drop less than 4? Daniel, doctor, if you want to put up the pictures, it's simple. Not like the case that Abai gave. If you're going to go to that to where the less than 4 is the bottom, that can be. Why can't it be? Because guys, when you have a mechitza, the mechitza has to go down to the ground. Yes, theoretically, good nachis, good achis, but no, if gediyim are able to go through there, it breaks the good. So if the 4 is in the ground, how like a mechitza, you don't count it part of the wall. It's not a wall. Maybe put the 4 all the way in the top, by the way, which was the case of Abaya. You know why this won't work? If you can change the picture, doctor. Here, look at this, guys. We learned these klalim already. See, that's the beauty. We learned all the klalim. Don't be afraid of ERUVIN anymore. We learned the klal that whenever you have a wall, but avira mahai gisa, each size of the open space is bigger than the size of the wall itself, it's mevatel the wall. So we're getting to 10 tvachim. If you look at the picture from the ground until the top rope, you have 10 tvachim. And yes, because of lavud, 6 is solid. Only 4 is paretz. Theoretically, paretz one of it. But why does the wall end by the top? Because you're counting on the top rope. There's no lavud between the top rope and the one in the middle because it's more than it's 3 tvachim and more. Elama, that doesn't matter. But the wall ends. Why does the wall end on the top? Because you are being machshev the top rope. The top rope is completely bottled. Why is it bottled? Because the airspace underneath it is 4 tvachim. The airspace over it is infinite. Look inside. So that cannot, this wouldn't work. So maybe put your hechatimsa in the 4 is in the middle. Very good. No, it also won't work. Why not? Now, guys, take a look. The bottom piece, because of love, it is called a solid. It's called a solid. The top piece, because of it's called a solid. The sum total is 6 solid, right? More or less, and 4 paretz. No, it's not called Amemunu paretz. You know why? Because since not a single solid is bigger than the gap by itself, the gap is 4. The solids are only 3. Elama, when you combine them both together, you have 6. So there's a cloud that we are accepting, that if the only way you get to oimid merubam is by combining different pieces together, but there isn't one single oimid piece that's bigger than the gap piece, it's also not good. Havalei oimid merubam alapara, it's only mishnei ruchas, meaning by putting 2 different pieces, two ruchas, because what's separating the top and the bottom is the gap. And if that's going to be good, then we should come to a shmanina that when oimid merubam alapara, it's only through shtei ruchas, it's good when we know it's not the case. So therefore, my friends, the reason why the Mishnah gave the case that it gave, and the sum total of the ropes do have to amount to a tefach and plus, has nothing to do with the boy of Rav Hamnuna. Elo, Rav Hamnuna, hachi kami boyle. Let me give you the case where Rav Hamnuna's boya will have an effect, whether it's good or not. Kigoin, guys, I made myself a beautiful painting. Mamish art. Kigoin, the Isa machatzeles, you take a mat, that the total height of the mat, trying to get the camera of Chabad.org. Okay, very good. The total height of the mat is Zayin Umashu. You'll see why you need to have a Mashu. Is 7 and a bit. And V'chakak Bagimel. You went ahead from the mat that's 7 tvachim tall, you cut out the bottom 3, but you left the top 4. Which is good, right? Because now you have oimid, merubam alapara. One piece of oimid together, 4, is bigger than the parts. Not only that, why do we have to say 7.5? Because the wall has to end with something. So that mashu, throw under the gap of the 3 tvachim. The shavak dalet, you left the top 4. And umashu, go to the bottom of the 3 tvachim. And you know where you put it up? You hung it on 2 lachis, but the bottom mashahu is within 3 tvachim. Guys, this is so good. Now you have parts. You have oimim merubam parts. Guys, being right, you have since oimim merubam parts, we can view the whole machatzeles as a wall. As a wall. The wall comes within 3 tvachim of the ground. The machzelis now is 7 and a bit. So you have 10 from the floor until the top. There should be a good mechitza. But you got yourself a problem. What's the problem? That there's an opening of 3 full tvachim. 3 full tvachim is not loved. It's more than loved. If Elama, say it's a Pesach, that's the Rav Hamnuna's boya. If you can say that a horizontal opening is a Pesach, then you got yourself a good mechitza. That's his boya. If a horizontal opening is not considered a Pesach, because people don't make doors that way, if it's not a Pesach, then it's not a good mechitza. Even though it's oimin merubam alapara, but it's not konim, it's horizontal. That's one scenario of his boya. Rav Ashi Amar, and according to most Rishonim, Rav Ashi holds that even Rav Hamnuna will agree that in the picture that you're looking, in this scenario, we do say it's a Pesach. We do say it's a Pesach. Eloma, his question will be the classical mechitza teluya. For that, you don't need a picture. Mechitza teluya means that you have a mechitza that the mechitza itself is 10 tvachim tall or more. Oh, that's not a mechitza. Elama, it doesn't come all the way to the ground. If it would come within 3 tvachim, loved, but it's not within 3 tvachim. Rav Ashi is asking, I got it, you don't have loved, but since at the end of the day, view the bottom opening as a breach, as a Pesach. If you can have a horizontal Pesach, as long as the gap in the bottom is not equal to or larger, that's the first machlokes we learned today, to the top wall, maybe it's going to be good. That's Rav Hamnuna's boya. Mechitza teluya boilahu and kidaboy minei Rav Tavla mirav regarding mechitza teluya ma'ashatat bechurba. It was just usual diber boheva that a churba, when a house begins to fall apart, sometimes the walls, when the roof fall away first, sometimes the lowest part of the walls fall away first. Can you carry in that house? The walls don't go down to the ground, but as maybe say, if the mechitza that's still standing above is meruba alapara, it's good. And we know already that Amar Lei, that Raf says, ein mechitza teluya materes, Only by Mayim, we had that case already above. We're not going to repeat it again. By Mayim, even though fish are swimming back and forth, I don't care, because Kalu Shekilu Chachamim b'Mayim. But when there is a wall that is above ground and the partitions begashmias don't touch the ground, if it's not close enough that you hinder the movement of little animals, then it's mevakel the mechitza. All right, we have another few minutes. Let's go weiter.
Do we say that it's not considered a Pesach because Gedim Boiken Bay?
Saying that even though it's not considered a Pesach, it's Gedim Boiken Bay. Very good. Masha Inkin, when you have walls that are vertical, the solid part goes to the ground. The fact that Gedim are going in the entranceway, I don't care. So do human beings. So it has to be a Pesach. We don't view it as a Pesach. That is according to Ravash. According to the first case, we don't know. Maybe this would work. Gediyam are not boiken b'chlal because it's not on the ground. Okay. No, I take that back. I take it back because since the first case there's less than 3 tfachim, ein gediyam boiken boy. Okay. Says the Gemara. We're going back to the Mishnah. Makifim b'konim. So we had in the Mishnah machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, and it seems like Rabbi Yehuda is saying b'shayara it works, but the Yachid it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda is rejecting this koisel, this mechitza ru'ah. But how can that be? We learned clearly in Abraisa that even Rabbi Yehuda holds that it works to a certain point. Well, Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol mechitza Shabbos, lo hitiru li yachid, if it's for 1 or 2 people, if it's not for 3 people, then it's not going to work if it's encircling an area that's larger than 2 saw. Which means if it's less than that, then even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that we can rely on a mechitza ru'ah. So it's a stira. So answers the Gemara, just like Rav Nachman or Rav Bibi Barabaya said elsewhere. We'll see in a moment elsewhere. That you're right. That when you learn about the Rabbi Yehuda, that's disallowing the use of this wall. He only means you can't use it for all of your needs. All of your needs means if you are in a shayara, if you're traveling and you have a lot of speklach with you, you would need more than 2 saw. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can't do all your needs. But 2 saw or less, you could. That's shot in the Mishnah. That when does Rabbi Yehuda differentiate between a shayara versus less than a shayara? Only to rely on it for more than 2 saw. You can't give kol sarkon, but 2 saw or less, even Rabbi Yehuda's mind that you could rely on a mechitza ru'ah. Now, heiche itmar, where did we learn this din of Rav Nachman v'Teimer Rabbi Rabaya? Aho ditran, regarding that which we learned in our Mishnah. It says in our Mishnah called mechitza she'ena shel sasiva erev. That's the end of the Mishnah. B'chlal, it's not a mechitza. These are the words of Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda, and on that he asked me, Amar Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda, Achi, Ma'atanya, Echad Yachid, the Echad Shayara, you could rely on strings, and Uma ben Yachid l'Shayara, Yachid you only give a base of sign, Shnayim you only give base of sign, but Gimel, you have more, even according to Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda. And by the way, according to Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda, you don't have as much as you want. You only can use it to section off an area of 6 saw. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda, but same contradiction. That means he also agrees that it works somewhat. But even according to everyone, there's another limitation. If you are using a mechitza ru'ah, which is that you can't have 2 saw or more that is not being used, that's vacant. We're going to learn more about this tomorrow. So again, there's a stira. Is it good or not good? On that, Rav Nachman, they came Rabbi Barabaya, Lenitzracha, Ella, Litein Lahan, called Sarkan. And now we're going to learn the halacha. Darash Rav Nachman, Mishum Rabbeinu Shmuel, right on this mechitza ru'ah, a wall that's either only vertical or only horizontal. It's not lattice, certainly not a solid. So Rav Nachman Darshan, that Yochid, you only get base of sign. Based, even 2 people, you can only use it to encircle an area of base of sign. Only when you have 3, then this sounds mamish like Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda. So right away the Gemara asks on Rav Nachman in the name of Rabbeinu Shmuel, Shavak, Rabbanan, which is Rabbin, and you're doing like Rabbi Yisrael Rabbi Yehuda. So he says, you're right. I take it back. I retract my psak din. He wanted everyone to know that he retracted. So he got his mouthpiece, his amoida, his interpreter that talked loud. That dvarim shomarti lefnechem, second to last line, kol say biyodi. Brum, kach omru. This is the halacha. Here again, he didn't paskin fully like the chachamim. Yochid, only based Osayim. Vaiter not like the chacham. Shnayim, only based Osayim. Vaiter like Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. But once you have three, here he paskin like the chachamim. Nasa shayara. Once you have a shayara, noisam kol sacham. So ask him on Tav Yud Zayin. What did you accomplish? If you changed your halacha because you want to go Yachid V'Rambam Halacha Kerabim, so Vaiter Reisha Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda and the Sefer Rabbanon. The Gemara says yes, and we're going to end with this concept, which is mamash heartwarming. Mishum deka avua b'shitase. As we just explained, that the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, the father of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, also holds that a yachid, that for a yachid or for two people, that's how we clarify the Mishnah, you could rely on a koisel, on a mechitza re'ua. Not more than that. In other words, the first statement of Rav Nachman's psak is taka not going kedas rabim, but he didn't pick a das yachid. He picked a das of two tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. So that's a gavaldik klal. That if it's yachid and if you stand alone, normally the psak won't be like you. The moment you have one chaver standing with you, isn't that life? You have one person standing with you, you can go against the rabbim and we can pass kanach like you as well. God willing, to be continued. As it's late tomorrow morning, we're going to start to learn at 10 to 7 because of Rosh Chodesh. Davening starts in 30 seconds. We'll run to shul.